Record. All right, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Devon Evans. I'm a relationship coach, and I actually just began my training program for sex coaching with Dr. Patty Brighton. So I'm excited that I will be able to add on to my coaching experience.
I'm so excited for you. I am Tasha Jackson, and I am a psychotherapist in San Francisco, and you're in Dallas, right?
In Dallas.
And we both watched Esther Perel's, I can never pronounce her name right.
Esther Perel's Sessions Live 2019.
Yes. And
in New York City.
Yes, you were live.
Mm-hmm.
I was live streaming at my home, and so
Mm-hmm.
probably had some different experiences, even though we were watching the same thing.
Yes. Yes.
You doing the actual exercises live with a collective emotional experience, and then me dealing with my children, like calling in the middle of my totally different. And the subject matter, which anybody who's watching today, pretty exciting. It's searching for Eros, see if I can pronounce this right, and eroticism. What was the other main titles?
It was finding a sense of vitality and aliveness was kind of the theme through eroticism in the broader sense of the word, not just honing in on sexuality, but a sense of aliveness, a sense of vitality, and helping clients to find that ability to become awake and to stay awake in a very broad sense. And a lot of it did have to do with sensuality and incorporating sensuality and the body and experiences outside of just the usual sexual scripts and the usual relationship scripts.
Yes, so well said. You speak it perfectly. And so for anybody who's tuning in, I think our thoughts are that we're going to talk about our favorite points in the beginning or big brushstrokes. And then if we have time, we can pop into some of the nitty gritty, because I think there's some juice in the details too. Mm-hmm. And so, and the subject matter jumped everything from what is erotic, what is, how does porn play a role, how to recover from sexual, how do we get that next bet closer with our erotic lives? Mm-hmm. And it went so many different places. So, well, I think we should just see where we go, kind of mimic that.
Yes.
Would you be a guinea pig and tell me what sort of your favorite takeaways were?
Yes. So since I was there in person, this was what they didn't show on the live stream, but at the very beginning, they had guest Amber Ryan, who's an international movement meditation teacher. She came up to the front of the room and guided us all in, I would call it an erotic dance. Really, it was movement. It wasn't any kind of scripted dance or choreographed dance, but she had us start with loosening up our bodies, and we kind of started to wiggle certain parts of our bodies, maybe our hands, maybe our shoulders, our waists, our spinal cord, and she had us close our eyes and get in tune with our own energy. And she had us slowly kind of raise up our eyelids and turn around, do a 360 turn to notice where we were in position to each other and in the room and get a feel for the space. And as the music started to pick up, our bodies started to move a little bit faster, a little bit more in rhythm with the beat, but also with each other. So as we're kind of circling around the room and moving around, we are syncing up with the people's body and energy around us, and we're sort of almost like mirroring each other without even realizing it as we're moving around the room. And Esther and everyone was doing this. And she asked us before we started the movement to try as best as you can to take a few steps more than what you would normally do in your regular comfort zone. And which is difficult for the people who are traveling from different countries that are maybe a little bit more conservative. They're not used to being in New York City and it being so progressive and open. And I mean, because at some points it was kind of like we were in a club, just, our bodies were grinding in front of other people. And I think it was especially challenging for some people to reconcile the professional atmosphere and their professional identity with this sort of erotic side of themselves that they're encouraging. bridging that.
Bridging those scripts together, which
Yes.
talked about actually in the
Yes,
sessions. Okay.
she did.
Yeah.
She did. And so, so that was great because you could feel the energy shift from the beginning, where it was like, you know, people were a little bit more closed off. They were kind of looking around because not everybody traveled together. There were like, for me, I didn't know anyone who was going to be there, but you could feel the energy increase and rise, and the murmuring. It was harder to get people to simmer down when it was time to move on to the next activity, which was great, but it also was a little harder to stay on track with stuff. But overall, I would say that it was a good, there was a lot of interest in what the presenters had to say, and everyone there was so curious of how to get to the next level with eroticism and vitality and sexuality.
Yes.
I mean, so everyone was very hungry and thirsty for themselves and professionally.
Yeah. And, you know, I think she created a space where, okay, we have all this empirical data, but let's be creative. And what is it beyond? And that I feel like even online, like there are some, like I would say Twitter psychological bullies out there, like, well, where's the evidence and where is this? And it's like the academia sinking in, where we're clinically doing stuff in there, and I want to be empirical, of course, but there's also stuff of like, okay, well, I don't know why, but this seems to work. Let's talk about it. Let's come together and collectively do this. And here's a space where it's kind of a sensitive topic for people. By the way, I got your cold somehow. I got your cold through Dallas. You sent it to me. So yeah, and I just love talking about what is eroticism, like defining it. That was one of my biggest takeaways, was like how much our imagination plays a role. Thinking about just almost having an orgasm in your brain. At one point, you know, I sent a little saucy text out, you know, like I was just like inspired, you know, like my mind was wandering, but it is like that they played a video of the two guys in the movie of at the Holocaust of like
That's what it's called.
Yeah, and sitting there and side by side just talking to each other to orgasm. And I think that was one of that I will definitely carry away of like, okay, where is our head with that imagination, and what are those blocks and what are those ways that we can cultivate? And I know I will sit with that personally, and also, you know, invite my clients to play with that.
Yes. So you said the word imagination, and that was the key word that she was wanting to leave people with. That is the difference between being just sexual, mechanical, performative, and being erotic, is that space for your imagination to wander down different roads. And your entire universe is open for to use any of those elements to bring into an erotic space. And that it is about creativity and to humble yourself as a professional, that everything that you try is not always going to work. And hearing Esther herself say that she tries a lot of things that fall flat, and she says, you know, look, if it doesn't work, that's okay. You know, I have an idea in my head of where I think I can take things, but you have to tell me. And the same thing with our partners in our personal lives. I'm going to try something. I have no idea if it's going to work, but let's play with it. And that sense of playfulness is what makes it fun and enjoyable. And that truly there is no such thing as failure when you're just experimenting with things.
Yes, to be open, to explore, just explore, and with, you know, with our clients to explore, like, okay, you know, sometimes I tell them everything, we're just going to throw a bunch of spaghetti noodles on the wall and let's see what sticks. Or I'm going to ask a bunch of questions and I don't know which one's going to work for you, but you tell me. And, you know, and then I wonder if like using that, transferring that into the bedroom or the kitchen table, whatever, you know, or under the kitchen table. I don't care. The laundry with it going on high and the dryer, whatever. But like experimenting and going and just like, okay, we're not going to see what works or with this person and their different story, but let's try.
Yes.
And
yes.
have freaking fun.
Yes.
You know, we have so much trauma that it's hard to always loosen up.
Yes. And I would say also, like what you're saying, trying all these different things. And part of the fun in trying all these different things is that you have almost like different variations and different volumes of things, of experiences that then you can compare to, because that contrast, I think, is so good. And we all have different variations at different intensity levels and different qualities of sex and sexual experiences. And I think we do need the ones that are less satisfying to appreciate the times when you just have really great sex.
Yes. Yeah.
So you need all of them on the menu in order to appreciate them, because if you only have the really good stuff, then
it's life lessons through, you know, sex. It's like, okay,
yes,
it's just metaphors all over.
Yes.
So there are certain things in the beginning that like I underlined. I just want to like kind of nip into a detail that was so powerful for me of defining eroticism, of sometimes can be just somebody paying attention to you.
Yes. The quality of the attention that you're getting from the other person.
Yeah. And when they said that, I just had a physical reaction of like, oh,
yes.
You know, I was like, oh, that is something, you know, your body just senses like, oh, because it's like you feel them, you feel their everything on you.
Yes.
And for me, there's nothing more, and I think this came up later in the day, there's nothing more to be desired. Desire and eroticism is so wrapped up, and as well as confidence. You know, they're saying that, empirically saying that the biggest thing that people turn on is having confidence.
Yeah.
And so this part of someone, it has enough confidence to give you their attention, and for you to have that confidence to stay present just really impacted me. I was like, okay. Yeah.
Yes. And you're right that it needs to be on both sides, the confidence to give that and not expect necessarily anything in return, and the confidence to receive that and to not shy away from that, or to not diminish the quality of the attention that they're giving you and saying, why are you doing this? You know, and shrinking. And also, you know, she talked about how incredibly appealing it is when we can be fully ruthless in the best sense of the word and not have to feel responsible for the other person, because you can't sexualize someone that you have to feel emotionally responsible for.
Yes, I completely, that's that part where you're like, if you're caretaking, the eroticism part goes away.
Yes.
And, you know, that often.
And a parentified figure, if one person is parental and the other one is more like a child.
Yeah. And then you think about it like, oh, how sexy is the, you know, parent to child dynamic? It's not so sexy. And if it is, what's going on? You know, what is that? Then we've got some interesting things to think about of like, if you feel sexy, if that person is, you know, so that kind of creeps into the pedophile range, you know, in my head. It's a whole different subject.
But you're right. I mean, she did say that if your head is screwed on right, no one wants sex in the family.
Yes.
And this is different from saying, call me daddy, call me mommy, you know, like those are just, again, playing with roles and playing with power dynamics. Which, speaking of, one of the important takeaways that she wanted people to walk away with was that there is power in every relationship.
Yes. Yeah. And I can't wait to dive into that. Which is interesting of like, what will that serve in certain ways and how that bounces back. And it's very interesting. There's a quote that I'm not thinking of right now, but there's sex and everything, but there's so much power and I'm screwing it up.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
All right, so I was gonna dive into another. So there's like a statement here that I underlined. Repair is where the trust begins. I thought this was interesting because in attachment theory, I'm going to get a little nerdy here. In attachment theory, and Gottman always talks about, hey, you know, it's about we're all going to fight, but it's how we heal after fighting. And that's where the healing is. And that's where we can really put our arguments behind us and move forward.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly believe that. But I don't believe it's 100% of where the trust is. And this is where one of the few parts that I disagreed. Because I feel like if you think about if someone keeps not just showing up for you, it's going to erode your trust. So maybe I'm not fully getting the concept, but you could repair that and say you're sorry. But then if they continue not to show up, I don't know. It's not really, I guess it's not repairing ever if they not doing it by action. So I don't know. I'm conflicted. I'm still sitting with this.
Yeah. Because I think maybe what you're pointing to is that there needs to be at least some incremental improvements along with the repair, maybe, to show that, hey, I see you, I take you seriously, I take your concerns seriously. Let's see how I can contribute to this in a positive way. And it's maybe less about making things perfect and versus are we slowly moving toward something better? Maybe.
Yeah. No, I like
that's
that.
my thought, but
I like that. No, there's movement towards healing. And I get that. I like that. I'll take that.
because I know what you're saying, that if you're constantly hurting, constantly having this disrepair, and if it's like Groundhog's Day where it's always the same and there's never any change or variation, then you could say that maybe is a form of abuse or neglect or something where there is a lack of consideration there for the other person's state of being.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to move to Avia.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing her name right? You have the brochure. I just have my sketchy notes.
Let me look and see her name.
And I have as starting out my statement that I wrote down are, what are the stories that you tell yourself that are no longer useful? And I love that question. Like, what stories, what is this that we used as a kid when we were adapting to life that worked? And now what are these stories that are no longer useful? But now putting that into our erotic life. And I don't know if I've taken that step from doing it with my clients to the erotic place. So I don't know. It's just interesting. What are your thoughts?
Well, I remember one part where Esther was talking about how a lot of times we say we want something, but when we actually receive it, we're afraid to receive it. We don't actually want that. And we can clip our partner's wings, so to speak, in putting them in a light that is not helping them, and it's not helping you and your relationship. And so, and that to me is part of, that's a limiting belief there, a limiting belief that you have about your partner and a limiting belief that you have about yourself for who they are to you. So I think that might not be, I don't know, I think it's almost like intertwined with our limiting beliefs and theirs as well. It's like we're truncating them and their identity and our identity. And so sexually speaking, I mean, it could be that, you know, that role of one person is caretaker, and it doesn't matter, like she said, if it's a man or a woman, gender neutral. If one person is the caretaker and the other person is maybe more of the relationship manager or trying to maintain the relationship, then it's like we're setting that person up to continue in that play and in that space, and we're limiting our exploration there, and we're limiting the sexual roles that we could fulfill with that person. But I think sometimes it's difficult to break out of that when there have been so many years and so many layers that have compounded into formulating those roles. And sometimes I think people don't know how to break out of them. And I think that's where people get stuck, is they don't know how to, because to me, it comes down to a perception issue, a perception of yourself, a perception of your partner, and a perception of how you are together, your dynamic between the two of you. And that's, to me, where the most power, like where the biggest shifts can come. But it's some of the most difficult work.
Yes. Yes. That's really well said. I like that. It's beautiful. It's good. I like it. I'm going to push this forward. I'm going to end on that little part because it's so good. I'm going to push this forward and I'm going to read some things and then maybe we can like see what sparks from it.
Yes.
Okay. Body and emotions are entangled. Unconsciously, it is encoded in our body. We feel our emotions in our body. Learn what our creative body feels like and awaken that part. Center to yourself, the clear, creative, just doing what you're doing. When you think erotic, but really think alive. Alive comes in many volumes. Broaden the definition of eroticism. Confidence is the biggest turn on. When someone's not taking care of themselves, it's not desirable. Imagination is eroticism. And then we dive into the subversion. I think I wrote down subversion, which doesn't fully, I'm not sure if it really makes sense here, but I thought this was a key part that kind of trickled in throughout, was addressing the marginalized parts of ourselves. And coming to what we sprinkled upon earlier of bridging these scripts that we tell ourselves. And I wrote down, personally, being a mother and being sexy, like, because we have, the matriarch, even in fashion clothing, oh, that's matriarchal, that's gross, right?
Yeah.
And like, okay, how do I be sexy in a place where it's 20 somethings that are in our culture? And so it's like, okay, how do why am I believing that? Like, how do we bridge these scripts? And that you're kind of what you're talking about with your perceptions, what you just said so beautifully, like, okay, how do we move the needle just a little bit and then domino effect on all of it within all those different layers. And then of course there's the shame. The legacy story was definitely, she definitely kept on touching on that. And I am so interested to reading this book, The Orgasm Answer Guide. Did I have that down right? I think
I didn't write that one down, but that sounds right.
The title sounds pretty saucy to me. Yes,
I know.
I'm like, yep. And it's like, and I love that, and I haven't heard it in a while, but it's that research of that we have a body part that is only made for pleasure, us women. And that has been denied for so long. And that we need to, I think in a way, it's a way of validating that we need pleasure in our lives.
Absolutely.
And like, okay, like, or it's whatever you believe is your higher power just has a funny joke. Like, here's this body part, figure out what you want to do with it. Like, I don't know. But like, let's enjoy that. And let's acknowledge that we need pleasure, and pleasure is what we all strive for. And that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, is there anything you want to add on, or should I continue on in my notes?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, there's a lot. Because I liked what I forget who said it, but it might have been Sarah, but she said, I wanted to correct the language and say that we don't have orgasms or give orgasms, we experience orgasms. And I thought that was really cool. I liked that because it's true. And to extend that a little bit further, that there are a lot of people now in this whole field talking about let's prioritize pleasure above orgasms, because the orgasms will fall underneath the pleasure. And so instead, it's like how they say, the more we focus on orgasms, the more we seem to miss the target. But if we can start with pleasure, and if someone is having difficulty finding sexual pleasure, then make it a little bit more neutral and start with our senses, our five senses, and think about things in your daily life that are more, that feel good to you, that feel, I think it was one of the last presenters, I think she's from the afrosexology.com, and she was talking about how, oh gosh, I just lost my thought. Oh, she was saying that when she was younger, she would always want to wear clothes that felt good to her, and she was told, no, don't touch that, you're going to break something. No, don't do this, something bad is going to happen. And when she came into her womanhood, she realized that I'm going to give myself as much permission as I want to experience all of my five senses, and I'm going to do it to the fullest. So every sense I'm going to celebrate. So she said, I call this orgasmic living. And I thought that was beautiful. That's such a great way to feel our full humanity in this wonderful body that we've been given. It's really a celebration of life, which is the whole theme of the conference, was celebrating our aliveness.
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly of, starting with saying experiencing an orgasm. And it made me think we're needing, and I think we're at the crux of a cultural shift, because we've had this as a patriarchal experience. And the man, once they have an orgasm, they're kind of done. And like, okay, let's, I think we're shifting, and it's exciting. Okay. And I think for the man, it's going to be better too, not to be so focused on the orgasm. And this other part of what you're saying of do you say orgasmic living? Is that what you said?
Orgasmic living, yeah.
Yeah, and having this part of feeling, because we have a life right now that is so focused on auditory and visual. And when we're little babies, we know that they need to be held all the time. But we deny ourselves that, or we think we don't need it. And then when we do, it's overwhelming. And the more we have something, the more we're better at it, and we're good at it. And we're in this place of a loneliness epidemic, depression epidemic. So gathering all that back in is beautiful. And I do actually think we're at a different place with, bringing in more of the senses in different ways, like aromatherapy. It's coming, but I hope that we can continue as healers to implement that in. So I like it. It's exciting.
Yes. We did discuss how women's sexuality has become narcissistic, and not in a bad way. It's just a shift. It's only a shift, because I don't think that it's a bad thing. I think it's about damn time, where women are, because women's social role is that of the caretaker and putting their attention on others to make sure that other people are okay, in the way that she can become the most sexualized and to sexualize herself is if she is the center of the sexual attention and she is the turn on. And I think that is so incredibly true. And I think that some of what we see when we hear people complain about oh, well, he goes too long, it takes him too long to have an orgasm. I think behind that is that she doesn't feel like she's enough of a turn on, that he's able to climax from that. But I think it's interesting though how for men the shift has been this patriarchal view of, oh, she owes it to me to have sex with me, I'm her man, I'm her husband. But now in Western cultures, in the United States, men will say, my biggest turn on is to see her turned on, is to give her pleasure. The more pleasure she has, the better I feel about myself.
Yes.
And
yes, I have so many things I could go on tangents, because I think we need to be careful as women not to use sex as a currency. Well, I will give this to him because he did this. Whoa, just be aware of that. And I think that so much we're still in that mindset.
Yeah.
Or he deserves it because of, like, really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Right.
But yeah, I forgot what you were saying earlier. Oh, the narcissistic part. I still am stuck with a lot of women need to have that focus on themselves in order to feel
Yes.
that pleasure. And I'm not sure if there's always that awareness, and I'm not in a man's body. If, like, a lot of men have told me that they have to think about something else not to have an orgasm.
Yes.
And so it's like, you need to almost be so much the other way, and we need to be the other way. So, like, maybe this is okay. And maybe we need to not pathologize and put the word narcissism. It's just be, body focus, like have a
Yeah.
better, less negative name around it. Like,
Yeah.
let us focus on us, and you can focus on the baseball stats. I don't know.
Yeah.
Work on your fantasy football while I'm on you. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
do whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think I want my partner to be thinking about that when I'm having sex. All right. I'm going to move forward from there to maybe not what everyone wants to talk about, but I think we need to. And that would be sexual recovery. And I had read that book, what Holly Rich touched on, True Notebooks, and I read that really young. And have you read that book?
Mm-mm.
It's about young people in jail and their writing and how powerful it was and healing for them and for her to be connected with this. And all her experience of sexual assault. And I was touched by the part that it sometimes takes 10 years for people to come in for treatment. And then with another speaker later on, it was a man, and I'm not recalling his name right now, but coming in with the mindset that it was a man who talked about porn, that most women have had sexual assault.
Don Shuey, I think it was.
Yeah. And I think that is a different mindset. Instead of thinking, oh, have you had, which is such a question, like, right? Then someone's like, yes or no, that just kind of like, okay, clam up, versus like, tell me about. And that has that part of like, okay, yeah, because it's so much of women's histories. You're more the minority than not.
And we probably can't even assume that the 9% of men is an accurate number, because it's probably very underreported. So maybe that is something that we need to, or at least ask for men as well.
Yes. And I think it's tricky too, because it's like when you're doing a sexual history, it's really tough. It's, it's a sensitive subject. And I think there's so much more shame with men, and her touching about the part of like, have you had some pleasure with it? And people admitting like, yes, there was some pleasure with it, even if it's just the aspect of feeling special. And I've worked with that with clients before, and it's entangled in there, and it's complicated. What else was I going to say here? I thought her part of telling them, and she said it was a line that's used a lot, but I don't think it means it diminishes its power, is tell them that was then and this is now. Here I am. I'm just going to repeat that again because I think it's so powerful. That was then, this is now, and here I am. And then launching into the part of helping them, talk about that control. Survivors want to have control of who I am and general control. And then also looking at the pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Because they emphasize that it's not just the absence of pain, but it's integrating pleasure back into their life as well. So it doesn't mean that your job is done once the pain is gone. It's that you really have to become fully integrated again as a human, and psychologically you need to be able to experience pleasure again. And another thing she said that I really liked was she said, follow the symptoms.
Yes.
And so you might want to just dive right into the main issue, but to give it time for the client to give you almost like little seeds there, and knowing that the details in that are important, that they mean something. There's importance in the details, and to follow the symptoms of what those details are, and it might lead you to some kind of resolution or breakthrough. So I thought that was really
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. And her personal story of starting out as an intern, having this girl going, I don't know what to do. And then,
Yeah.
the supervisor telling her, just stay the course, just stay the course. And I think it's such an important reminder of, trauma work. I think of, have you ever seen, again, I'm drawing a blank, of, it's a Redwood movie about Horse Whisperer. Have you ever seen that movie?
I think I have. Yeah.
Okay. And I recommend my clients, and now they're like, what movie? That sounds ancient. But it's a movie about a woman who falls off a horse. I'm not spoiling it at all. And she has her own, she's hurt. The horse is hurt. And everyone goes through their own recovery. And he works as this, the healer towards the horse, of letting the horse just roam and waiting for it to come back.
Yeah.
And, the mom and times wanting things to be done. Why isn't this fixed? Why isn't the horse better? Why isn't my girl better? And this, so much of our trauma recovery is sometimes, we don't know what pace it's going to happen, but
so true.
But to be there in that vehicle of holding the space and consistent, like, okay, what is this about? What is that about? And with ourselves.
Yes. Very good points.
And there's another, I'm going to keep moving forward because there's so much information here.
Yes.
I love this line, go hook up with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, at least once a day, right?
Yeah, just once a day. Okay, I'm going to go moving forward with another favorite line, which I am guilty of sometimes, and I really need to change my mindset of victim versus survivor.
Yes.
And using that language.
Yes. Yes.
So
yes.
Anybody listening, I'll explain it, of when we have this part of feeling that we label ourselves as victim versus having this mindset you're a survivor can grow and move forward, where victim feels very stagnant. That's what I take from it. And words have meaning, and we're trying to grow and have meaning and heal. I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah. The it's like the victim mentality is, look what that did to me, and then the survivor mentality is, that didn't do anything to me. So it's like the opposite sides of the spectrum, because the survivor mentality, a lot of times people can think like that wasn't bad. I mean, even I have thought that before, of some of the things that I've been through, that I'm like, I don't need therapy for that. Like that didn't really damage me. Like I'm stronger than that. And dismissing its power versus giving it too much power and overruling you. So it's like it's like to become maybe more of an integrated person again is somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah. It's like we need to validate what's happened. Like, here is a validation of what happened, but also see the positive. You have come from this. And I think that is such a moving language of like, wow, look at who you are from this. Versus sitting in that helpless space that trauma can give us and immobilizing us, because often in trauma we are immobilized, our wings are cut. So all right, this is so good. Okay, so healing through pleasure. I wrote down, and I don't remember, this is my senior brain going at it, erotic intelligence with men. I don't like that line, whatever it meant, I don't know now. And the performance anxiety, I think that was touching on having, not thinking of the orgasm as it, if I'm remembering correctly, of just like letting go from that and thinking of it as a big spectrum idea of eroticism.
Yes, outside of just the regular penis and vagina sex, and not putting so much pressure on the mechanics of the body, when we have much more expansive definitions and idea of what sex is, and coming back to the whole theme of it, which was using your imagination, which I believe is where he played that clip for us, that you can have sex in your mind. And a lot of times when and Esther has talked about this in her book, her affairs book, that you can literally be having, you could have had sex with someone 100 times and never have actually touched them. But the potency and the realness in your mind is just as vivid as actually performing it in person. So that can be used, I mean, that same thing that we do in these underground relationships, if we could do what Esther says and take and use that creativity for our real life relationships, we could, I mean, have a pretty booming sex life.
Yeah, it's vulnerable, I wonder how it
Yeah.
touches into that vulnerable place of sitting there naked with our fantasies or naked with exploring. And like you said earlier, we get in these roles, and how do we, or habits and perceptions, and pushing that from here to there. And it's interesting. It's hot though too.
It is, yeah. And I was going to say, when Ian Kerner talked, I thought if this was an interesting survey that he brought up, and I'm not sure if I'm following along with where you are, but it was a survey from NBC that asked what percentage of married women fantasize during sex about sex with someone who is not their spouse.
Yes, I love this.
The percentage was 75% of women.
Yeah.
And only about 50% of men fantasize about another woman.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was like, I definitely thought that was happening.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked by it. And I thought, like, and the same with the man, but I was wondering, like, I wanted to know more details. Is it because men are more, tend to be more visual? Is that stereotype really true? It's like, I wanted to know the definition of, like, well, I don't know. But I thought that was great, of like, how much is it in our heads versus our bodies?
Yes.
And so I thought that was great. And then I'm going to jump to, because we're on the same page here. This line, learning from gay men, this line of GGG, I loved it. Do you remember?
Good, giving, and what was it?
Good, game, and giving.
Good, game, and giving. Yeah. Yes, that's an excellent point. Describe what that is.
So basically, of like holding to what can we learn from gay men in our straight relationships or whatever, you're floating around in every direction, which is great. So like having this, okay, this is good, like being open, like how do you be open? This is how I interpret it. How do you be open to eroticism? Okay, this is good. Like, if you're with somebody, you're talking about anything and someone's like, okay, this is good. That's opens the door to that safety. And the next thing is like game. Okay, like we're game. Usually in the classic, heterosexual relationship, the woman's played that role of doing no. Because that's our history of whatever the religious, all that
patriarchy,
kind of stuff.
Resisting all of that.
And then giving, like it's a give and take. And I wonder with gay men, since there's not these prearranged roles, if it is that give and take a little bit more, of like, okay, let's think about it. It's not of the woman laying there doing the starfish, or sorry, or that's like, okay, is that one way? Like, okay, maybe that's okay for one time. I'm not going to be judgy, but like, okay, in general, how do we think of this sexual play? So I just love that. GGG.
Yes. And the way that I remember him putting it into context, like was how turned I think it's hot, whatever your turn on is, regardless of how I personally feel about it. Yes. So if you're into BDSM stuff, I might not be into it, but I'm good giving, or I'm good game and giving. Yeah. So if you're down for it, I'm down for it. Let's do it. Yes. And I like to use the analogy of improv, where you yes and. So it's like everything that you just said prior to what I said. It's being open to it and expanding on that and like rolling with it. Like I'm not going to negate anything you just said, because everything you said is like perfect. Let's roll with that. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. And it's
great.
Hot. It's hot.
It is. Yeah. And I like the research that he pointed out, that when most people introduce something to somebody else, they're open to it. Where I think we sit there in this level of like, oh, they're not going to be into it because of whatever we have, we project into the situation.
Yes.
And that then the crazy stat, which I don't remember, about, I want to say it was 90, I really don't know, but so many people just being bored in the relationship.
Oh, I know. They're
I have the emoji, I'm like, oh, so
I know.
sorry.
And again, it comes back to creativity and imagination. That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are willing to try the suggestions that their partners make. Like, that's pretty encouraging.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to switch it to porn.
Yes.
Let's do some porn. I want to give back to this. I thought she did a great job of, I feel like what the mainstream media has is porn is awful and it's doing all this stuff. On Twitter and the people that I follow, it's like, porn does no harm at all. So I feel like I see these two different worlds, and it was open discussion of like, hey, let's just have an open discussion about what this does.
Yeah.
And he bringing up the paradox. And I loved it. I thought that was great to like have, okay, let's really see how this is. And him piecing out this part of straight men. I had a hard, for him saying I have a hard time getting around it for straight men and what it does with women, but for gay men it does this. But the big takeaway that I had from his talk was that porn can validate us in ways and say that it is okay to think this, this, and this, and you are sexy and acceptable if you're LGBTQ, or this sex is okay, or and I had never thought of porn doing that for somebody.
Yeah, as being self-affirming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I know. You're right, though. I liked when it was Don Shuey and Ian Kerner talking about the complexities of that paradox of porn, where there's more power dynamics in hetero porn than gay porn, where this is his observation that there's not so much a power struggle between gay men in porn like what you see in a lot of the mainstream free porn. We're not talking about the ethical porn that does, like Erica Lust, that features a lot more of the LGBTQ real stuff, because with her stuff, people are literally writing in their fantasies and she's creating them into a movie production.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it doesn't get much more real than that while still being fantasy. So, but you're right, being able to legitimize people's preferences and tastes, and because that if you're thinking about it and sexualizing it, somebody else is too. So to be able to see that on the screen with maybe someone who looks like you, and especially for someone who's struggling with same-sex attraction, to be able to see that and have it like a safe space to go and sexualize yourself and someone else virtually.
Yeah. And if somebody else is listening to this, of like, I don't think this is talked about very much. It wasn't talked about it, but some people can be turned on by watching gay porn and be straight.
Absolutely.
And vice versa, lesbians watching two men get it on. Like, it's all over the place, and our sexuality is so complex. So it's not only validating that this is okay, but it's also a part where I can watch this and be turned on and not have to read into it.
Absolutely. You're so right. You don't have to rationalize it. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it was Justin LaMiller's book, Tell Me What You Want, that talked about how for straight women, I think that one of the biggest genres of porn that they like to watch is lesbian and gay porn. They don't want it. Their first pick is not straight hetero mainstream porn.
Yeah.
Which, okay, what does that tell us too?
I know.
The other side of that coin. And I can't blame them, because there's a lot of the heterosexual, and that's the other side of the coin, is that the fact that we can't get around that porn is appearing to be more and more aggressive toward women. So
yes. And I don't know, because I haven't done my research, but I know internationally there's some stuff that coming out of China. But I don't know fully. That. I'm kind of I shouldn't be saying more than I don't know, but I remember a little side story. I remember in graduate school, in one of my sexuality classes, I had a professor who had an assignment for us to watch on 3 different types of porn and do a report on it.
Mm.
And for him, if we're open to it, express our feelings, that our experience from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was such an interesting experiential experience.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if everybody has sat there and watched gay porn if they're straight, or if they're straight, watch gay porn.
True.
And I was like, for myself, I'm like, I really like watching these 2 guys get it on.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm like, oh, they're 2 penises. Oh, I'm attracted to penises. Like,
right.
It's very like, okay.
Right.
So it made sense, but I don't know, like a total tangent.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, like we can't not talk about obviously the exploitation of that as well. You know, looking at racial minorities.
Yes.
And the kind of grotesque, I mean, just absolutely violent and degrading kinds of porn that there are out there for people of color, used as like literally the scum, but sexualizing them at the same time, which almost increases the degradation of it at the same. And so everything that you said, the paradox of it, the complexities of it, the layers of it, you can find all of it in porn. And that porn isn't to blame for the lack of sex education that we have in our country. The fact is that it is a political issue. It's a religious issue. We have a legacy of it, coming back to the legacy theme, and that there needs to be communications between professionals, parents, and the educational system and our politics, and that porn is like really a separate thing. And on some levels, we should be glad that there is porn for all the beneficial reasons that you described earlier. But we do use it too often as a go-to scapegoat for a lot of these other issues that are rooted in our country's legacy.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I think the topic we're porn protectors, if I could call it that. It's like, I don't know, I mean, it's great. I want all the voices out there. We have increased our accessibility to porn from where it was 20 years ago. We're not going in the back of video shop to get porn.
Right.
So, but how can we increase our sex education so it's the same accessibility, where if a kid is curious, or anybody's curious, like here we go. And I have to say, I got inspired to like want to interview some people of like how to give the best oral sex and put it on YouTube, and just like, let's just fine, I'll be part of the movement to make, if you want to do it together, it'd be fun
to normalize.
to like, okay, here's sex education, like pleasure education. Like, you want mechanics, if you're looking for mechanics, let's give you mechanics. It's somebody's personal take on it, but let's give it to you if that's what you're looking for. So if you don't want to go to porn, that's fine. I mean, again, like I don't think porn's the evil, but
so I agree.
All right, moving on, if that's okay. Okay. Okay, integrating in our lives. See if I can remember pay attention to the self, connection to the spiritual, and the mechanics. So PCM. I like that. The ways to integrate it in our lives. So I'll repeat that again. Pay attention to ourselves, the connection to our spiritual body and emotions, and then the mechanics. So sex being so much more. I love that. Let's see here. What else? Set aside your perfection. I love this, and I hope men can hear this if they're watching. Men get socialized to do.
Yes.
And to take that away, and what that feels like. I mean, I just love if there was a man here to ask, like, what would that feel like just to not do?
Yes. And I think that we are seeing more and more men who are curious about surrendering the role of the pursuer and the role of the director in sex. Because that is normally the role that they play. They direct the scene, so to speak, and they pursue. And I've heard a lot more men DMing me too. They're not clients necessarily, but they're men who get the sense that I understand where they're coming from, and they want to be, I'm not going to say submissive, because it's not a submissive role necessarily. There are men who want the submissive role, but they want the burden of someone, of telling someone what to do, of knowing what to do, of thinking what to do. And they want to be in their bodies too.
Yeah.
They want to get out of their heads and be in their
Yes.
body and enjoy being, relaxing. They want to relax.
Yes. And I think it comes in dance with women coming with their voice. Like women haven't had a voice, and when we give them more voice, it can have men relax more. And so for me, it's exciting that we're moving this way in our culture. And I know a lot of men have told me they feel emasculated because they feel like some voices are too big. So it's like, it's this dance of like, okay, even the word manscaping, that's wrong. Where's my mind?
Yeah.
I was saying mansplaining. I'm all over there.
Yeah.
But just words that I've stopped them from like going forward and leaning in. So it's just like, I think we're having this dance of like, okay, we want women to have a voice. I think most people, but also, like, how do we do this? And so it's exciting.
What would you say to a man who feels that he both feels emasculated by wanting to experience that, and maybe he's been told or made to feel that he is less of a man if he wants to be relaxed more and have someone else tell him what to do and be the director of their sex life for a little bit? What would you say to those men?
I'd probably dive deep, if they are my clients, like dive deep into their history of what their role was with their mom. Of like what, or people in their life that have hurt them, is that part of having control again, of somebody maybe who has stepped over that line or wasn't there for them or whatever it is. What trauma did they have so it's so individual, but usually when you uncover it, there's something there, insecurity, script they have about a woman.
Yes, and I think too, our psyches just want a balance. It's like we're always striving for some kind of a homeostasis. We want to, like, there's a part of us that is always somewhat geared toward self-correcting. And so when there's an abundance of being in control, some part of us knows that we need to lean a little bit more back this way. And sometimes we're able to get that in real life, and other times it still remains an unfulfilled desire, an unfulfilled wish. And so being able to sort of strive for some kind of a balance between giving your power and having that power. And I think we're always in some ways striving for that homeostasis.
I like that.
But
I like it. I'm going to cruise forward here. I'm not going to say her name right. Sarah, you want to take a stab at this?
Nazarada or something?
Yeah, sounds right. She dived into some great things, like what are symbols for your vitality? Did you bring something?
I didn't bring anything, but mine was, in my mind, it was a great big giant oak tree in the middle of a thunderstorm rumbling. Thunderstorm is coming. And the wind is just blowing this tree back and forth, and the leaves are blowing back and forth, and they want to hold on, but some have to be let go. And it's like right on the brink of something big that's coming. And it's like you can smell the wind, you can smell the air, you can smell the rain. And it's like all of your senses, and you can see like the dark clouds in the background. And it's like, for me, that's a full sensory experience. And so to me, that represents desire. And because to me, desire it's wanting the full everything that life has to offer. So to me, that was like a representation of everything.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. So for anybody else who's listening, I'm going to backtrack and like, what symbol would it be to represent our vitality and to think about what object that is? I love that. Also that it's something in the earth. It's so based and it has those roots. There's so much symbolism in trees for me in nature.
Right.
and the boundaries within a tree, and how grounded we can be, and what pulls us up and uproots us. And so it's beautiful. I love it. And I didn't have time to think about it because I was on the spot just listening, taking notes, and I got very distracted about the egg up the vagina. Again, like my own, like, all right, I'm gonna jump. She was amazing. I don't want to dismiss her at all. But she also talked a lot about like therapists and their own way of not getting compassion fatigue.
Yes.
And which is so important. We get so drained, and then we don't have much life for our own. And I think it's so important. And I loved hearing her speak and her experiential processes. But just out of a matter of time for us, I'm going to jump forward. Let me see here. I have a statement here. Brain doesn't understand a thing. You have to work on pleasure and pain. I don't know what that is. Okay. There. Jumping. I didn't know about this whole yawn thing about the fight and flight. Do you remember what that was?
Remind me.
Okay. And see if I get this right. I need to look this up, or maybe someone can tell us after looking at this, that when you yawn, it stops the process of the flight and fight. Do I have that right?
Is this about about burnout? Like the book that Emily Nagoski wrote? Completing the stress cycle?
No, it was another area of like when you're starting to get heightened, and then in doing a yawn, kind of breaking that
a
cycle.
Pattern interrupt.
Yeah. Which I never heard, so I need to do more research on that. Okay, I love this line, take care of each other beyond the superficial.
Yes.
Which is so true, right?
Yes.
Just like, oh, okay, so you got this going on today, you got this. Oh,
yeah. No. And I think too, that could be good for your relationship, just periodically taking inventory of what are your goals in our relationship? What are you looking for? What are you hoping that this relationship will bring you? And I thought about, I need to do that with my husband. And just,
I have she was open with me sharing this. I have an acquaintance of mine who I just absolutely adore. She's in her 70s, I want to believe. And her husband started, after a couple years of marriage, this place where every morning they got up and they'd have coffee together in the bedroom, like a little side table, and they would exchange for just a few minutes what their dreams were.
Oh my God, that's so sweet.
Isn't that sweet?
I love that.
And when their kids were super little, they didn't want to wake them up. So one of them would crawl across the room to get cream for their coffee. And they would sit there, and he was a doctor, so he was super busy. But they always had those moments together, and it went deep. It wasn't like, who's going to pick up these kids, or what are we going to get at the grocery store? It was, what is at the core of your being, you know?
My gosh.
And they've had an amazing marriage since,
Beautiful.
Their kids are in their 50s or, whatnot.
Wow.
I just love that. So it's like,
that's beautiful.
And so I call it, who's going to get the cream?
That is so good.
Isn't that cute?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for doing this today.
This was so fun.
Yeah. And at least for me, for people watching from my perspective, I'm going to leave some of the details of some of the speakers' names, where you can find them online, some of the books mentioned, because in our next session, I definitely have a plethora of books, because like Justin's book, and I really love the side-by-side eroticism versus face-by-face eroticism, which we'll get to in part 2. But there's a layers of things where people can dive in to this even deeper than we're talking. So
yes. Thank you so much for
having me. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love this mutual. All right, you take care.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye.